There was a sound like a strong driving wind. Tongues as of fire appeared, and the apostles, once afraid, were filled with the Holy Spirit. That is Pentecost. Not only a dramatic moment in the life of the early church, but the day the mission of the church broke open in public. If you value clear, faithful Catholic reflections like this, subscribe now and stay with me through the great feasts of the church. Today, the church celebrates Pentecost Sunday. In her readings, the church shows us both the visible outpouring of the Spirit and the inner transformation that follows from it. Pentecost is often described as the birthday of the church, and that is a helpful way to begin. But Pentecost is more than a beginning. It is the moment when the church is filled, empowered, and sent. It is the fulfillment of Christ's promise and the turning point from waiting into mission. In the comments, tell me this: when you hear Pentecost, what comes to mind first? Fire, mission, or the Holy Spirit? The first reading from Acts 2 is the clearest account of Pentecost. The disciples are gathered together when suddenly there comes from the sky a noise like a strong driving wind. Tongues as of fire appear and rest on them, and they are all filled with the Holy Spirit. They begin to speak in different tongues, and the people around them hear the mighty works of God proclaimed in their own languages. This scene matters because Pentecost is not quiet or private. It is public. The Spirit does not descend merely to console the apostles inwardly. The Spirit equips them for witness. Fear is still in the background of the story, but it is no longer controlling the outcome. The same disciples who had once hidden are now being prepared to speak. One of the most striking features of Pentecost is that speech becomes central. The Holy Spirit does not fall upon the apostles so they can remain silent. The Spirit gives them speech, boldness, and intelligibility. People from many nations hear the proclamation in their own languages. That means Pentecost is not only about inner spiritual experience. It is about mission, communication, and witness. The gospel is not meant to remain locked in one room or one people. From Pentecost onward, the church begins to speak outward. The second reading from 1 Corinthians 12 gives another essential dimension. St. Paul explains that there are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different forms of service, but the same Lord. He also says that in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body. This is important because Pentecost is not only an event of power. It is also an event of unity. The Spirit does not erase differences by flattening people. The Spirit gathers different people into one body. Gifts remain varied, but the source is one. Service takes different forms, but the Lord is one. That is why Pentecost matters for the church in every age. The Spirit does not create chaos. The Spirit creates communion. The Gospel for Pentecost from John 20 gives a more intimate view. The risen Jesus comes to the disciples, says, "Peace be with you," and then breathes on them, saying, "Receive the Holy Spirit." This reading shows that Pentecost is not separate from Easter. The gift of the Spirit comes from the risen Christ. The Spirit is given in the context of peace, mission, and forgiveness. This matters because many people think of Pentecost only in terms of visible signs like wind and fire. Those signs are real and important. But John reminds us that the Holy Spirit is also the gift of the risen Jesus to his church, a gift tied to peace, reconciliation, and mission. Pause here and tell me in the comments. Which Pentecost image speaks to you most? Wind, fire, or the breath of Jesus? Pentecost changes everything because it changes the apostles. Before Pentecost, they had known fear, confusion, and waiting. After Pentecost, they begin to act publicly as witnesses. The difference is not explained by confidence alone. It is explained by the Holy Spirit. That is why Pentecost is one of the Church's decisive feasts. It marks the transition from waiting to witness, from promise to fulfillment, from gathered disciples to a proclaiming church. The Church is not born out of human energy alone. It is born through the gift of the Spirit. For modern believers, Pentecost is not only a memory of the early church. It is a revelation of how the church lives. The church still depends on the Holy Spirit for courage, unity, holiness, discernment, and mission. Without the Spirit, the church becomes only an institution. With the Spirit, the church becomes a living body sent into the world. Pentecost also speaks personally. Many people know what it means to feel hesitant, uncertain, or spiritually tired. Pentecost reminds them that the life of grace is not powered by human strength alone. The Spirit still renews, strengthens, and sends. Pentecost is not an ending. It is ascending. The apostles receive the Spirit so that the gospel can move outward. The church is not gathered for herself alone. She is gathered so that she may be sent. This is why Pentecost stands at the heart of the church's missionary identity. The Spirit gives courage to speak, wisdom to serve, and unity to endure. The Spirit is not an accessory to the life of the church. The Spirit is essential to it. In that sense, Pentecost is one of the clearest answers to the question of how the church began to act with boldness in the world. Pentecost is the day the Holy Spirit filled the church. The sound of wind, the appearance of fire, the proclamation in many languages, the unity of one body, and the peace of the risen Christ all belong to this feast. Pentecost shows the church that the promise has been fulfilled. The Spirit has come, the church has been filled, and the mission has begun. That is why Pentecost is not only the memory of a miracle. It is the feast of the Spirit who still renews the face of the earth. If this reflection helped you understand Pentecost more deeply, subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone preparing to reflect on the Holy Spirit. And before you go, leave one final comment. What does Pentecost mean to you most personally? Power, peace, unity, or mission?